I want to talk to. They're going by alien noises in Germany. That's what I have written down. Alien noises. What's up?
Yeah. Holy shit! I did not think I would get through today. Hi.
Hi. What's up?
Hi. How's everybody doing? I am completely.
We're doing just great. I'm having a good Friday night. We talked about racism in America, ghosts, and deism and theism. So pretty interesting night so far.
Okay. Yeah. Well, do I go to my question? Or
this is the part where you get to ask us your question. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So. Yeah, like you said, I'm in Germany and everything, and I always hear this from how people talk in here or like TV shows or movies or whatever. But my actual question is like how it's always elaborated on between the white community and the black community. Is the gap between there really that bad, like that big?
Can you just the gap between what? What about the gap?
Do you mean like living spaces, or do you mean like culturally? Like, can you be specific?
Everything. Like for example, there are living places like not villages, but I don't know another word. Cities, villages, whatever you call them, where mostly only black people live, or mostly only white people live, or people where they actually separate and that kind of weird shit. Or like black and white churches, or that kind of stuff. Like things you see in the movie.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ro. I want you to take it.
There are a lot of communities that are very much predominantly black and predominantly white, or predominantly Latino or predominantly Asian. But there are also a lot of overlapping communities. And so it's, pardon the pun, but it's not always black and white. It depends on where you are. And it depends also sometimes in how old those communities are. There's a deep history of segregation in this country. And so as a result of that, as also a result of housing policy and also transportation policy in terms of highways and so forth. And when those were built, a lot of communities that were segregated got even more segregated. And so there's a whole history around that in the United States in a lot of different places. And the same thing certainly for Native American communities. They were actually, corralled out to reservations. And so you have whole communities where just Native American people are living and not always thriving, but living and surviving. And so, yeah, that's true. But you kind of need to kind of go a little bit further into what you're specifically asking, because yes, segregation is a thing, legacies of segregation is a thing, but what specifically about that segregation are you trying to investigate or talk about?
It's mostly, oh God, I hate English. Let me try to word this correctly without sounding too much like an idiot.
That's okay. There's a lot of people who speak English who say very idiotic things. So
that's right.
It's okay. Your German is probably going to be more precise.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, I mostly only know this from stories of others, aka movies or stories of that kind of thing. So I have no personal preference I can reach onto. That said, I wanted to pretty much ask as an, oh God, how to put this? It's pretty much as in, what are the differences then between, because right now I have like a Caucasian and an African American. I'm just going to ask you to, what are
between like churches and stuff? Is that what you want to know?
Churches, just churches or living places, like the community itself. What are the how to?
Yeah. Well, so when you have a population,
the differences.
You have churches in this country where black people weren't allowed to be in them. and weren't allowed to be in the same place as white people. But you do have black people who believe in Christianity. So what do? They have their own groups, and they have their own communities, and they develop their own culture, and even their own theological identity sometimes in the 20th century, which is interesting. But also, like, like that separation is where we see the differences still today, because as black communities tend to be around other black people and stay in black community, they develop that same church culture, and that just gets passed down to the next generation. And so that's why you see that there. It's obviously there's no law in this country that says that I can't walk into a black church, or that a black person can't walk into like a predominantly white church, but the culture is still there, and the history of that is still there, so that we still see the effects of that today. So that's why you see such a big difference there. And also, again, like a worship culture that's totally different, readings of passages that are totally different, that you see in predominantly white churches. It's just a matter of culture. It's also just a demonstration of how religion is just as much of a cultural byproduct as it is of anything else. And that's just talking about churches, of course. There's a little bit more to your question, but anyway, I don't know if Ro, you wanted to speak more to that.
Add that when we talk about the Christian part around segregation, that legacy is a legacy that specifically is coming out of segregation. So what you have today in terms of the black church or black churches is almost entirely a byproduct of having been shut out of worship, of an integrated worship experience. The people who started the AME Church, Absalom Jones, Richard Allen, literally started it in protest from not being able to participate on the same floor in the same church during a worship service as the white people in Philadelphia and so forth. And they went on to start an entire shoot-off denomination that's called to this day the African Methodist Episcopal Church, because of being segregated by white people in their communities. And almost all the other denominations are a result of that. Also, a lot of the missionaries came to, as I mentioned earlier, from the Caribbean. I'm Caribbean American, Afro-Caribbean. When there's no indigenous Moravian denomination to the Caribbean islands. How did they get there? They got there by missionaries. They got there through two Moravian missionaries who actually happened to be, as I'm told, traveling with John Wesley, the person who is the founder of Wesleyan theology and all that kind of stuff. They were on the same boat. They sold themselves into slavery so they could go preach to slaves or the enslaved Africans in the West Indies, in the Danish West Indies. They missioned to them. There's also missions to Jamaica and other islands from the Seventh-day Adventists, and all these different denominations. The Mormons are there. All these people are there. So when you go to those communities, you will see Black people who are worshiping with them, with one another, and then when they come to the States, they find other people to worship with them who are part of their community, who share the same sounds and accents and foods and customs and stuff like that. And it's just a part of the cultural milieu that is religion, and it being in these cells in different parts of the world. It's not always a negative thing. It's just a thing.
Well, how big are, can you guys give me examples on cultural, I butchered that, cultural difference?
That's something you may want to that's a whole nother sociological study. So there are people who can answer that. There are things you can study, books you can study. I would say if nothing else, and this is a really surface, but there was just recently a documentary on PBS by the professor out of Harvard, Skip Gates, out of Harvard, on the Black church, and it didn't hit every corner of the sort of diaspora of Black churches in the United States, but it's a good place to start. and it can give you some insight into the diversity of Black churches and denominations and how they sort of
Yeah.
evolved and developed. And from there, you can find a whole lot of threads that take you down the road that can answer some of those questions that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to like again, Christianity has always been a product of the people living in it. And, you don't see this phenomenon exclusively in the United States or in the Caribbean or the places that we're talking about too. You see this all over the world. Wherever Christianity develops, you're going to see some differences there in how the people worship, how they understand their relationship with God, and just their daily life is going to be different. So this isn't really as it's unique, of course, to the United States in the way its specific development. But in terms of Christianity, you see this all over the place. This is definitely something that's endemic to the religion.
Yeah. No. With the Christianity, it's pretty much, I'm already aware that it's then comes down to like different branches of Christianity and everything. It's mostly just what I'm mostly curious about is the cultural difference in every aspect of it, aka when you come to the church thingy, because like again, I know this from movies, so I have to admit, like, church is not really my thing, but if I look movie wise at the churches, the black one is more interesting.
Well, I mean, that's going to be, every person you ask is going to tell you a different story about their own experiences, I guess, but it's kind of like saying, like what I was saying, there's actually a lot of sociological data out there on some of these key differences. And I would go that route because we don't have enough time on this show. Unfortunately, we got to wrap things up right about now, but it's a good question. And I'm glad that you talked to us. So thank you, Alien Noises from Germany. I appreciate you talking to us tonight. So have a good one.
Thanks.
Really cool.
Bye.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.